Today we continue with section 3.2 يا شباب. And if you remember last time we were talking about polynomial functions and their graphs. And we started with the end behavior of a polynomial. And we said for any polynomial it will behave as one of these four. If you look at the graph number 1 on the left corner, from the left it's going down and from the right it's going up. So we say this is down far left, up far right, number 1. And this will happen when if we have a polynomial of odd degree and the leading coefficient is positive. If you look at the second graph, number 2, again the end behavior is up far left, down far right. So this means the degree should be odd, but the leading coefficient should be what now? I think should be negative. If we go to the right side in the blue curves, number 3 يا شباب, both ends are going in the same direction or not?
Yes.
If yes, this means the degree of the polynomial is even. And since both ends are going up, the leading coefficient is positive. In number 4, you can see that both ends are going down. So again, the degree is even. But the leading coefficient now is what? Is negative. Shabab, open your cameras and look at the screen, not to something else. After this, we made a discussion about the turning points. We said a turning point can be a maximum or a minimum point. And we said the number of turning points of a polynomial should be at most equal to the degree minus 1. After that, we took an important theorem talks about, or we name it the intermediate value theorem for polynomials. And what does it say? If we have a polynomial between 2 points, and those 2 points have opposite signs for the value of y, this means for sure this polynomial is having an x-intercept between these two x values. And the last thing we discussed was the behavior of the polynomial around the zeros. We said if the power of the bracket containing the 0 is 1, the curve will make a cross with the x-axis, as you can see here. What's the power of the bracket on the right, Shabab?
1.
If the power is 1, we said the curve will make a cross at that 0. And if the power of the bracket is even 2, 4, 6, or 8, it will make what? A touch with the x-axis. It can make a touch from above the x-axis or from below. And if the power is odd more than 1, like 3, 5, or 7, what will the curve behave around the 0? It will make a cross with tangent. What does it mean, cross with tangent? It will cross and it will make a wiggle. تفحيطة. And I think this was the last example that we did last time to study the behavior of the polynomial around the zeros. Now quickly over this one. What's the 0 for the first factor? This thing, x squared. What makes it 0?
0.
0. Now what's the power of the 0 of x squared now?
Even.
It's even. This means it will make a touch at x equals 0. In the second bracket, Shabab, what's the 0 in the second bracket?
3.
The 0 is 3. What's the power of the bracket now?
Even.
In the second bracket, what's the power?
Even.
It's 4. 4 is even. This means
touch.
what's the behavior?
Touch.
It will make a touch. In the third one, ya shabab, what's the 0 of the third?
2.
2. And the power of that is
3.
3. Since the power is odd more than 1, it will make what?
Cross
A
with
cross with tangent. In the fourth bracket, what's the 0?
-1.
-1. And the power is even, so it will make a touch. And the last one, what's the 0 in the last one? -3, and the power is 1. And so this means this will make what? A cross. But to do this, or all this, shabab, can you tell me what's the power of x inside each bracket?
1.
So if the power of x is 1, what do we call these? Do we call them linear factors?
Yes.
So we have to make sure that what's inside each bracket is linear, which means the power should be 1. Let's take one more example, which is this
I have
one.
a question.
Yes.
In the first example, if we make the, for example, x -3, 4 brackets.
No, we have to see the 0 only one time. Again, we have to see the 0 only one time. If the 0 is repeated, you have to add the powers of that factor. And this is what my next question. You will see it in this question now. In this one, again, he's asking us about to study the behavior of the polynomial around the zeros. First of all, Shabab, what's inside each bracket, is it linear? Is this linear or not?
No.
So we have to make it linear by factoring. Now, can I add x squared and 3x squared? What do I get if I add them? I have 4x to the power 3 plus what? Plus 4x squared. Now the second bracket, can we factor it? Can I take x as a common factor in the second bracket?
Yes.
I have what then? X squared minus 1. Let's continue now. Let's factor the first bracket. We can take 4x squared as a common factor. What remains inside? X plus what?
1.
X plus 1. Now, can we factor more, the blue one? X squared minus 1, can we factor it more? Can we say this is x plus 1 times x minus 1? Now, ya shabab, do you see x plus 1 repeated 2 times or not?
Yes.
So I have to write this as one factor. And how do I write this? X plus 1 to power what?
2.
To power 2. In the same way, do you see x squared and x? I have to make these only one factor. If I do that, what do I get?
4x, 3.
And the last one is x minus 1. Now, do you see that every 0 is repeated only one time here, or more than one time?
Yes, 1 time.
Yes, now let's find the zeros. What's the 0 of the first factor?
0.
X equals 0. What's the 0 of the second factor?
Equals
-1. What's the 0 of the third factor?
1.
Now, what's the power of the first factor? The power.
3.
If the power is 3, this is odd more than 1. So what's the behavior around that 0?
Touch with tangent.
No, it's cross with tangent, not touch.
Yes.
What about the power of the second bracket?
Touch.
So it's 2. This means this will make a touch. And what's the power of the last bracket?
Cross.
What will it make here? Only a cross. Here we have studied the behavior of the polynomial around the zeros. If you have a question, raise your hand. You don't, I'll move on. After all this discussion that we have done, now we will learn how to graph a polynomial function. And to graph the polynomial function, we will do three things, Shabab. The first thing, we have to find the zeros and study the behavior around the zeros. The second thing, we study the end behavior. The third thing, we find the y-intercept. Then after all this, we make the graph. Let's take an example on this. What does he say here? Sketch the graph of p of x equal 4x squared minus x to the power 4. The first thing that we should do is what now?
The zeros.
To find the zeros. How can I find the zeros here?
Factor.
We have to factor. So can I factor this one? Can I take a common factor here, which is x squared? What should I write inside now? 4 minus x squared. Can we factor more? We have to say 2 minus x and 2.
Plus x.
Now we have to study the behavior around the zeros. What's the zero of the first factor?
0.
Zero.
What's the behavior?
Behavior.
Touch.
It will make a touch because the power is what?
Even.
Even.
Or it's even. What's the zero of the second factor?
2.
And what's the behavior?
Cross.
Why does it make a cross?
Because the power 1.
The power is. And what's the zero of the last factor?
Negative.
And what's the behavior?
Cross.
Cross.
So here we have found the zeros and studied the behavior. The second step that we should do is to study the end behavior. And if you remember last time, and we made a revision today also, the end behavior depends on the degree and the leading coefficient, or the sign of the leading coefficient. What's the degree in this example?
4.
4, which is?
Even.
And since the degree is even, both ends of the polynomial will go in the same direction. What's the leading coefficient?
-1.
Since it's negative, so what's the end behavior now?
Down. All down.
You will say
Down,
this is
far,
down,
Far.
far left, and also down what?
Far right.
Far right. One last thing that we should do before starting to graph is to find the y-intercept. If you remember the y-intercept we used to replace x by what?
0.
Replace x by 0, Shabab. What will the answer be?
0.
It's 0. So what's the order pair here? 0 and 0. Now we will collect all this information and put it in a graph. Let's start by the coordinate plane now. Let me just draw the coordinate plane and start working on it. I will take a copy from this application. This is our coordinate plane now. Let me just zoom in or make this smaller. Now, the first thing I should do here is to draw the zeros. What are my zeros? If I go up backwards, we have 0, 2, and what?
-2.
And -2. So I will plot these. Here we have -2, 0, and these are our zeros. Right. Now, Shabab, what's the end behavior? It's down far left and down far right. So this is my graph, Shabab. This means from the left side, the curve should be down, going down like this, and from the right side also it should go where? Down. Now let's start the behavior around those zeros. What's my first zero on the left?
-2.
-2. Now the behavior at -2, go up. What's the behavior at -2? It's a cross. So we have to make a cross now. To make that a cross, Shabab, should I draw my curve going from below the x-axis above, or should I start from above going down? Which one is correct from these two? The red or the blue?
Red one.
Red.
The red one, because we said both ends are going down. So I will just take this one. And did I make a cross at -2 here?
Yes.
Now, after the -2, is my curve above the x or below the x-axis?
Above.
This is above. Now, let's go to the next 0. What's my next 0?
0.
Now, what's the behavior around 0?
Touch.
It will make a touch, Shabab. How can I make a touch? Since I'm above the x-axis, should I make the touch from above?
Yes.
Or should I make it from below?
No, above.
Of course, I'm above, so I have to make it from above. Now, what's my next 0?
2.
2. What's the behavior around 2?
Cross.
It will make a cross. Now again, let me ask, should I draw my cross from above to below like this? Or should I draw my cross from below to above like this blue one?
No.
Of course, the red one, because the graph started from above. So this will be our graph of the polynomial. Of course, this is a rough sketch. It's not very accurate. Now I will draw for you the accurate graph so that you can compare the two graphs. Is our graph correct or not? Let me just give me 1 minute to draw it on a special application. Then I will show you the final result. I'm just drawing it, just give me 1 minute. And I will share it with you right now. This is our exact graph. I will just put it next to our graph that we have made, which is this one. Look at the exact graph and our graph. Are they alike?
Yeah.
I think yes.
Yes, but
But of course, our graph is not so accurate.
I have a question, Doctor.
Yes, go ahead.
How can we know the maximum values? Here
Thank you very much. This is a very good question. Shabab, this maximum value, your friend is asking about the value of y here. Well, actually, in this method, it's hard to find the value of y. This means we cannot find how much is this. We cannot know if we should go up or down. But if you want to be more accurate, do you see any real numbers between the zeros? Do you see -1 and 1? Between the zeros on the graph.
yes.
So you can substitute those numbers in the function. Just to give you an idea, where will the curve go? Up till what? You can substitute -1 and 1 inside what? Inside your function. It will give you an idea. If we substitute -1 in the function, go here and substitute -1 in the function. How much is p of -1?
1 for -1, 3.
3. So at -1 it will go to 3, as you can see here. But again, this is not the highest point. And this method cannot give you exactly how much is the highest point. But this method gives you a rough sketch. Okay?
Okay.
Let's take one more example, Shabab, which is this one. Again, here he says what? Graph the polynomial. Well, to graph it, as we said earlier, we have first of all to find the zeros and study the behavior. After the zeros, we have to study what? The end behavior. And after that, we have to find the y-intercept. And after that, we will make the graph. So let's start by the zeros now. First of all, is polynomial completely or not? What do I mean by that? Can I factor more, Yashabam?
No.
No.
The answer is no. So this is already factored completely. Let's find the zeros. What's the zero of the first factor?
0.
It's 0. What's the power of that factor?
4.
So it's, since it's 4, what will it make? A cross or a touch or a cross with tangent?
Touch.
It will make a touch. What about the second factor? What's the zero of the second factor?
2.
What's the power of the bracket here?
3.
3. This means what does it make? A cross, a touch, or a cross with tangent?
Cross with tangent.
Cross with tangent. What about the last one?
-1.
The zero is what? -1, and the power is 2, which is even. So this one again will make what?
Touch.
It will make a touch. So we have studied what now? We have found the zeros and studied the behavior around the zeros. Our second step is to study the end behavior. And to do that, Shabab, please pay attention. This is very important. We have to find something called the leading term. What's the meaning of leading term? The term that contains the highest power. And how can I find this? We took this yesterday. And we said we have to go to each factor and just choose the term with the highest power of x. So the leading now, in the first factor, I will just have x to power 4. Now in the second bracket, Shabab, I have two terms. I have x and I have 2. Which of these have higher power?
X.
X. So I will take only x. And what should I do with -2? Just remove it. I'm looking for the leading term. What about the last bracket?
Okay.
Expert.
I will also take x. I'm not going to expand. Expanding is correct, but it will take lots of time. So I'm just choosing what, Shabab? The highest power from each bracket. And the lower power, I will just ignore it or leave it. What's the multiplication of all these? If I multiply all these, what do I get?
9.
X to power 9. Now, what's the power here? This is called the degree. So what's the degree of my polynomial now?
9.
The degree is 9, which is odd. What's the leading coefficient?
1.
Which is the coefficient of x to power 9. This is positive, right? So since the degree is odd, will both ends go in the same direction or in opposite directions?
Opposite.
And since the leading coefficient is positive, so what's the end behavior? We will say this is
Up. Right.
down,
Right.
far left, and
Up.
up, far right. Now let's find the y-intercept. To find the y-intercept, we have to replace x by what? Replace x by 0, Shabab, in the given function. How much is p of 0?
0.
If you substitute, it will give you a 0. So what's the order pair here?
0. 0.
Now we have to collect all this information to make a graph. Let me again try to bring the coordinate plane here. Just 1 minute so that we can bring it. Okay. This is our coordinate plane. Now we will start by plotting the zeros. What are our zeros now? Let's go up. What are the zeros? We have 0, 2, and what?
-1.
And -1. I will plot them here now. -1, 0, and 2. Now, what's the end behavior? It's down far left, up far right. So from the far left, the graph should go down like this. And from the far right, the graph should go where? Up. Now let's draw the polynomial around the zeros. What's our first zero to the left?
-1 touch.
-1. At -1, what do I have? The behavior? A touch. Now, should I start my graph from below x-axis or from above? I'm talking about the left side.
Below.
Below. So at -1, I will start from below and make a touch. Is this the case now? Is this a touch or not at -1?
Yes.
And of course, I'm making the touch from below. Why? Because from the left side, the end behavior is down far left. So I will start my graph from down. What's my next zero on the graph?
0 touch.
0. And at 0, what do I have? Read at 0, we have a touch also. So this touch, should I make it from below x or from above x?
Below.
Below like this. Is this a touch or not also?
Yes.
Type. What's our next 0 on the graph?
2.
At 2, what do I have?
Cross
What's the
with
behavior at 2? Cross with
Tangent.
tangent. This means I have to turn my curve back and make a cross with tangent. Cross with tangent, if you remember last time, we said it will make a wiggle. What does it mean in Arabic wiggle? يعني تفحيط. And this will be our graph. Now again, just give me 1 minute to try to graph the correct one or the accurate one so that you can compare the two graphs. What was the polynomial first of all? Let me just have the polynomial so that we can draw it accurately, so that we can compare. Just give me 1 minute to do that. Type. Okay, I'm just going to bring the graph now so that you can compare it with the one that we made. Okay, so this is the correct one. Now again, if you compare our graph with the exact one, is our graph close to the exact one or not? Is our graph good enough?
Yes.
But of course, Shabab, again, as Ali said at the beginning, the minimum value here, the yellow point, we cannot be sure how much is it. If you want to be more accurate, substitute the number 1 in the polynomial and see what will the answer be. Now, how can a question like this come in the exam? He may ask you, where are the intervals where the graph is above x-axis? Can anyone answer this question for me? When is this graph above the x-axis?
From 2 to infinity.
From 2 to infinity. Or the question may ask you, how many turning points do we have?
3.
Do we have 3 here or more?
No, 3.
No, we have 4, ya shabab.
5.
The yellow points. Do you see these yellow points?
Yeah.
All these yellow points are turning points, which means they are either maximum or minimum points. How many touches do we have for the x-axis?
No.
2 touches. How many crosses do we have for the x-axis? 1. All these are kinds of questions that he may ask you in the exam. Osama, you're raising your hand. What's your question?
Yes, how we know that it's left down for left hand up for
Well, we made a revision from last time, and we said last time, and I made a revision at the beginning of the lecture. This thing. We said the red curves. Do you see the 2 red ones? The 2 red? These
Yes.
2 red, this means the degree is what?
Odd.
The degree is odd. The first red, when it will happen, if the leading coefficient is what?
Even.
The leading coefficient is positive.
Oh.
And the second red, the leading coefficient should be what? Negative. So in our example, we have found, first of all, what? We found the leading term. What was the leading term here?
X power 9.
X to power 9. What's the degree?
9 with it.
9, which is odd. And what's the leading coefficient? What's the coefficient of x to power 9?
Positive.
Positive. So this means this will go down far left and up far right. And we said this is the end behavior. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? طيب, Nawaf, are you with us?
Yes.
طيب. Now this example, Shabab, is the opposite. He says find a polynomial of least possible degree having the given graph. So this time he gave me the graph and he wants me to find the polynomial. But here, if you repeat reading, Shabab, what does he say here in the yellow?
Of least possible.
Least possible degree. Now let's look at the zeros. What are our zeros in the graph? We have a 0 at -6, and we have a 0 at 2, and we have another 0 at where?
5.
Now at -6, do we have a cross or a touch or a cross with tangent?
Cross.
Cross means the power should be what?
1.
The power should be 1. At 2, what do we have? Cross,
With tangent.
touch, or cross with tangent? And at 5, what do we have also?
Cross.
So now, to make my polynomial, I will say that p of x is equal to, I will open how many brackets now?
3.
3 brackets. And inside each bracket, I will write x minus, x minus, x minus. Minus what? Minus the zeros. So we have to x plus 6, x minus 2, and x minus 5. And since all the zeros makes, or the behavior around the zeros is across, the power of each bracket should be what? Should be 1. Now we are missing only one thing.
Yes.
What are we missing now? We are missing the leading coefficient. I have to multiply by a. This a is what now? The leading coefficient. And to find A, we need to use a point on the graph. And that point is given to us, which is what? He gave us 0, 30. So this 0, 30, I will use it to find the value of A. I will replace y by 30 and x by what? By 0. Yeah, so I will say 30 is equal to what now? A multiplied by what? 6 times negative 2 times negative 5. If we multiply these, shabab, what do we get? Is it 60 or not? Now, how much is A then?
Half.
30 over 60, which is half. So now we can write our polynomial one last time. So we say P of x is equal to what now? Half multiplied by these three brackets. And this is our polynomial. Of course, we can expand, but it will take us some time. You can do it on your own. We have learned how to expand in chapter P. If you have a question how to find the polynomial, raise your hand. If you don't, it's your turn now. I want you to do the next example. But before you start, I will give you some hints. Can you see the zeros? What are the zeros in this case? -1, what does it do? Is it a cross or not?
Yes.
But what about number 1? What do I have at number 1?
Power 3.
Cross with
Tangent.
tangent. Your friend is telling us I will take power 3. He's correct. Why? Because in the question, he says, read the yellow in the question. Read the yellow. He says least possible degree. So I should take power 3 or power 5 or power 7 in this one.
3.
Yalla, shabab. Solve this one. I'll give you only 2 minutes to do it. Start solving, shabab. طيب ناصر الفهيد, can you give us the first bracket?
X minus 0 and x minus 2.
X minus 0 and x minus 2. So what are my x-intercepts? What are the x-intercepts of the graph?
No, minus 1 and 1.
So what should I write in the brackets?
Minus 1 and 1.
Write the brackets, read the whole thing. What should you write? A multiplied by what?
a x minus 1 and
which is
x
plus 1, you
minus
mean?
1. Yes,
So
and x.
what are the powers now? For the first bracket, what's the power?
Odd.
What should I write the power? 1, 3, 5, 7. What should I write for the first bracket?
1.
1, because it's a cross. What's the power of the second bracket? Abdulaziz Al-Amri, can you help us? What's the power of the second bracket? What should I write? Power 1,
3.
power 2, power 3? Huh?
Power 3. Power
Can you
3.
tell us why? Can you tell us why?
Because it's cross with the tangent.
And the question said use or choose the least power. Now to find the value of A, we said to use an order pair, and he gave us an order pair 0, 2. So if we substitute 0, 2 inside the function, what will I have? We can simplify this into what we say 2 is equal to A multiplied by 1 multiplied by negative 1. So how much is A? Abdul Muhsin, what's the value of A?
Negative 2.
Negative 2. So what's our polynomial after we do all this? We will say P of x is equal to what now? Negative 2 multiplied by x plus 1 by x minus 1 to power 3. And this is our polynomial. Raise your hand if you have a question. Type. Our last example is this one. This is an old exam. Of course, here the choices, most of the choices that are written talks about the graph. But before doing that, I want you to find the zeros and study the behavior. I will just give you 1 minute for that, Shabab. Find the zeros and study the behavior. Don't do anything else. Just the zeros and the behavior around the zeros. Ahmed Al-Harbi, what's our first zero?
Yes, it's 0. X.
What's the behavior around that zero?
It's touch.
Thank you. Hassan Al-Hurabi, what's the second zero or the next zero?
3.
What's the behavior?
Cross with tangent.
Thank you very much. طيب. Let's go now to Yasser. What's our next zero, Yasser?
-1.
-1. What's the behavior of the curve around that zero?
Cross.
Why?
Because power 1.
Oh, thank you very much. Now, how many crosses do I have in the zeros? I'm gonna ask Mahdi. How many crosses do you see?
2.
2. So read the last one. Let's read the last choice, Shabab. The graph crosses the x-axis at 2 points. So this is the correct one. Of course, if you cannot do it with this discussion, you need to graph the function. And I think we did some examples how to graph. Any questions? Type. Now I will start by some questions from the recitation. This is recitation 3.2. Now let's read it. Again, I will give you just 2 minutes to solve this one. Read it. He says if f of x is given, as you can see, has the graph below, then a reasonable, he's asking about a reasonable possible value for the leading coefficient. So he's asking you about the sign of A. Is the sign of A positive here or negative? Please, I want each one of you now to find the, I want you to find the leading term, ya shabab. And how can we find the leading term? We have to go inside each bracket and take the term that contains the highest power. I'll give you only 1 minute to do that. Yalla, find the leading term. From each bracket, choose only the term with the highest power. Hussam, in the first bracket, what's the term with the highest power?
0.
The first bracket, I talk about this x plus 4. You see x plus 4?
Minus 4.
I want the term. We have two terms. We have x and we have 4. Which of these have the highest power? Of course, the highest power of the variable, I mean. Highest power of the variable. Is there a variable in the 4, ya Hussam? Yeah, anyways, when I say x plus 4, can I say x, this is x plus 4 times x to power 0 or not, ya Hussam?
No, doctor.
Why no?
Minus 1, doctor.
Now, what's the power of x in the first bracket? In the first bracket, what's the power of x, ya Hassan? The power of x is 1, ya Hassan.
Minus
This means
1.
I will cancel the 4. I'm trying to find the leading term. I will cancel the 4. Ali al-Ghiryafi, in the second bracket, which of these terms should I take to take the leading term?
2.
I will take x to power 2. And what will I do with the remaining ones? 2x and 1. Again, we will cancel them. The last bracket.
Yes, teacher.
Which term should I take in the leading?
You should take minus x.
Thank
or
you very
negative
much.
X.
Negative x. Multiply all these, ya shabab. What will I get? A multiplied by x squared by negative x. The answer will be negative a x to power what? Negative a x to power 4. Now a question. What's the degree here, shabab? I think the degree is 4, right?
Yes. Even.
Which is even. If the degree is even, what's the end behavior?
The same
Both
direction.
ends will go in the same direction. Look at our graph يا شباب. In our graph, where are the directions of the ends? It's up, far left, and up, far right. What does that mean? Will the leading coefficient be positive or negative?
Positive.
What's our leading coefficient in the leading term that we have found?
Negative.
Negative. Okay.
So the leading coefficient that we have found was negative a, and this negative a should be what now? Should be greater than 0. What does it mean greater than 0? Positive or negative?
Negative.
Positive.
So what can I say about a? Multiply by negative. So what can I say about a? A should be what, Shabab?
Negative.
So look at the choices now. Which of our choices is a negative?
A.
A.
Only the first one. The remaining are not. So this is the only possible value. And the question was asking about a possible value for the leading. If you have a question, raise your hand.
Yes.
Yes, Saber.
دكتور بخصوص old exams حقت 3.1 و 3.2.
I will put them today. I will upload them today, inshallah.
Okay, thanks.
طيب. We are done with this section, Shabab.
عندي سؤال.
Just wait.